what we are suggesting is the fact that it shows the value of Africa. It takes African history much more serious. It says that history, or rather Africa, had a history prior to contact with Europeans. There are processes of transformations that were taking place in Africa long before Europeans came into contact with Africa. So Europeans are not the harbingers of, dynamism in African societies. In other words, they are not coming into a continent that is dead, that is static, but they're coming into contact that has got a long and very rich history, going many, many thousands of years. So we are suggesting at grade 10 level that perhaps we should actually start the history from the 1700, or rather from 700, basically from the 8th century through to the mid-18th century, from 700 to 1750, by looking at historical Southern African city-states, and we've got plenty of those, and the Indian Ocean trade, the importance of trade as a factor that actually brings about dynamism in society. It also allows you to deal with issues of technology. What sort of technologies did Africans engage in? We often assume that, mineral discoveries are things that only came with Europeans. But if you look at these early societies, you realize how Africans were metallurgists. They knew how to deal with metals, such as copper, such as iron, and so forth. And so they were mining these things. So there are other technologies beyond just those that I'm actually mentioning. Secondly, we are saying that Mapungubwe should be revisited. So we are saying the topic here is revisiting Mapungubwe and contextualizing it with Kilwa in East Africa, Great Zimbabwe, Thulamela. So those are things that really need to be brought back. And of course, you can only do that by, drawing on other methodologies. So a multidisciplinary approach to history is important. And clearly, archaeology is at the crux of that. It's at the center of that. So historical links between East and Southern Africa would be important. So that even before you deal with colonization and Europeans, you've got a much deeper sense of the dynamism, of the transformations that are taking place on the continent and in the Southern African region. Topic 2 at grade 10 in terms of CAPS is expansion and conquest. Expansion and conquest during the 15th to 18th century. In terms of strengthening this area, there are a couple of topics that we feel should be added. The foundations of racism and the justification of social relations between the colonizer and the colonized would be the first one, followed by slavery and genocide against the Incas, Maya, the Aztecs, and other indigenous peoples of the Americas. The manner in which the genocide is discussed in the current curriculum, CAPS curriculum, is very narrow. It only discusses genocide in the context of the Holocaust. And we believe very strongly that there are, and historical evidence that does show, of course, and a lot of historians have written about other genocides. So we need to open this subject up to talk about other genocides. So we are suggesting here the Incas, the Maya, the Aztecs, and so forth, and talk about slavery as well. Then, the extinction of the Tasmanian Aborigines, the spread of Islam and Christianity in Africa, and finally, the political economy of scientific racism. Moving on to the third topic, the current topic that we have in grade 10 is the French Revolution. And the French Revolution is actually approached from this very liberal perspective, from a very European perspective. And our suggestions are that we actually need to look at the roots, start with the roots of slavery in the Caribbean. And in looking at these roots here, I think there needs to also be a focus on Haiti in the age of the revolution. And Haiti is a very, very important case study because, and it would actually even help us to grapple with some of the current issues that are, that we are facing today. A few months ago, we had this statement, uttered by the U.S. President, what's his name? Trump, right? Donald Trump. Donald Trump actually said that Africa, and Latin America and all those are, you know what? The word starting with an S followed by an H, and then an I and a T and a hole. All right? So he said that. But, actually forgetting how central Haiti actually was in the whole issue around the fight against slavery. So when you teach human rights, Haiti becomes a very important case study to look at. You cannot really understand the revolution, even in America for that matter, without really looking at what happens in Haiti. Haiti is the first, is one of the first republics. In fact, a republic by the former slaves. Toussaint Louverture, led this rebellion against France in the context of the French Revolution, informed by the French Revolution, of course. This slaves, and by the way, Toussaint Louverture is he's a mulatto slave. He's of African descent, mixed descent, right? He led this rebellion against Imperial France, which ended up in a revolution, and the revolution came about and Haiti became the republic in 1804. And so it is therefore important that you actually approach this topic.
And we're just coming out of that briefing, coming in from Pretoria.
Look at its impact in the Caribbean and the impact of the Caribbean and Haiti in particular on the United States of America. We're also suggesting that the other topic should be France and the USA's response to the Haitian Revolution. So in a sense, Haiti then becomes a paragon of human rights and democracy, rather than, how Trump actually characterized it a few months ago. So it is not the United States and France that are the paragon of human rights and democracy. Moving on, topic number 5 in grade 10 is colonial expansion after 1750, a case study here being King Moshoeshoe. That is the CAPS curriculum. Our strengthened curriculum has these topics. The first one is expansion of colonial conquest and the interior, and looking at resistance as well. Secondly, the wars of dispossession and resistance in the Free State. And then, you can also look at the Botswana, Babedi, Bavenda, and so forth, in terms of how they were affected by colonial expansion and how they responded in terms of resistance. How these areas, were actually affected by this process of colonial expansion. Then topic number 6 is the South African War and Union. It is heavily, political history. Our strengthened curriculum has the historical roots of the land question in South Africa prior to the 1913 Land Act, followed by the aftermath of the war and united front between Boer and Britain, and then white supremacy, citizenship, and the disenfranchised Africans, and then finally classes and the class struggle. This would be a more effective way of strengthening the curriculum. Then topic number 4 is transformations in Southern Africa after 1750, King Shaka and Mfetani. We have a strengthened curriculum, state formation in Southern Africa, the decentralized political system, the rise of centralized political systems. So you see it allows you to deal with the rise of political centralization, the formation of much more centralized states such as the Zulu state under Shaka. Then religion, belief system, culture, and social systems in Southern Africa. And finally, the pre-capitalist societies and economic systems in Southern Africa and struggle for scarce resources. So those are our suggestions in terms of grade 10. I will not go into details here in grade 11 and 12. But if you look at the CAPS curriculum, I think when you look at it much more generally, basically for those 2 years, our learners are dealing with contemporary, very, very recent modern history. History of the world, basically, after, basically from the beginning of the 20th century. Starting with communism in Russia from 1900 to 1940, capitalism in the United States, ideas of race, excuse my spelling, it's supposed to be race and not trace, ideas of race in the late 19th and 20th century, nationalism, South Africa, Middle East. You are all familiar with this as people that have an interest in history, right? Let me not belabor you with the details, but the Cold War, we cover those, especially grade 12, independent Africa, civil society protests, civil resistance in the 1970s, the coming of democracy, and then, and the end of the Cold War. That's what, for 2 years, learners have to grapple with. Now, clearly, for us as the ministerial trustee, we felt, this situation really needs to change. You need to change that situation, and our suggestion is that at this level, learners need to go back to some of the topics that they would have done in earlier grades. Which would have actually been covered in a very touristy, happy-clappy kind of way. It's playful, very playful, like the way in which pre-colonial African history is actually treated. It's not treated in a very serious way. So there's therefore a need to revisit these early topics at this level when learners are actually much more cognitively developed to grapple with the complexities. At this level, then learners would really be able to understand what does it mean for an Africa to have knowledge about complex technologies, to have civilizations, to have these complex trade networks, and so forth and so forth. So, and of course, archaeology is very important. So essentially, archaeology would be very important. Not only at this level, of course, at grade 11 and 12, FET phase, but also in the early grades. Archaeology, the importance of archaeology dealing with the ancient pre-colonial and colonial African societies. And of course, dealing with a range of sources, including material culture and archaeology, oral sources, oral traditions, linguistics, and so forth, and not just written sources, which is what history tends to focus on, documentary sources, right? So introduction of a whole range of sources. And these things are not new. They have been there in the curriculum. In fact, even CAPS still has these things, but it really pays lip service to this. If you are going to take some of these things seriously, you really need to engage them differently. So we are really making a call for bringing archaeology back into the content, which would enable a more African-centered approach to the history curriculum. So there's a need to revisit topics covered in the earlier phases in a touristy manner. Mapungubje. You know, we cannot just leave it in early grades. Perhaps there's a need to bring it back in the upper grades, grade 11 and grade 12. In the senior phase, when the learners are much more cognitively developed and advanced to deal with historical complexity. Well, now this brings us to the Ghana case, and we are asking a question here whether Ghana could actually serve as a model. You see, when we look at the senior high school syllabus in Ghana, which is over 3 years, basically grade 10, 11, and 12, it covers history in a very interesting way. First, if you look at the general aims of the syllabus, the curriculum, it says that the syllabus is designed to redirect the study and interpretation of the history of Ghana and other African countries from an African perspective. Now, the program aims at helping the student to, and they've got a whole list of seven things there. Firstly, to acquire the skill of gathering and objectively analyzing historical data that will enable them to interpret the actions and behaviors of the people of Ghana from a Ghanaian perspective. Secondly, acquire a more detailed study of the history of the people of Ghana from ancient times to date. And thirdly, study some other African civilizations with the aim of appreciating, among other things, the advancements made in earlier ages. And fourthly, appreciate the need for interdependence of societies to be able to relate events in Ghana to those of the outside world, not just in Africa, but outside world. And fifthly, to develop a sense of national consciousness and appreciate the factors that make for national and international unity. And number 6, acquire positive habits and attitudes, national identity as a Ghanaian and an African with a heritage worthy of pride, preservation, and improvement. And lastly, appreciate the relevance of the study of history in current and future development efforts of the nation. So that's what the Ghana syllabus says in the upper phase, that's from grade 10 to grade 12. Now, when you look at the units in the senior phase, what I've actually done was to look at each year. And the units, the first unit, or rather the first section, that is in grade, equivalent of grade 10. They focus on landmarks. In Ghana, they focus on landmarks of African history. And they cover 9 units, from unit 1 to unit 9. The first one is history as a subject. So they deal with history as a subject. So the theoretical discussion of the methodology, the philosophy of history, and so forth. Introduction to African history. So African history is introduced. And sources and methods of African history. So what sources and methods can you use to actually grapple with African history? And secondly, the second unit is about African prehistory from the earliest time to 500 BC. And number 3, civilization of pharaonic Egypt from 3000 BC followed by civilization of Aksum and ancient Ethiopia in East Africa, then civilization of North Africa, the origin and spread of Bantu civilization, Swahili civilization of the East African coast, civilization and culture of West African Sudan from 500 BC, and finally civilizations and cultures of West African forest and coast. So this is a really deep interrogation of African history, which goes back into very ancient times. Then in senior phase, our equivalent of grade 11, which they call senior high school 2. They focus on cultures and civilizations of Ghana from the earliest times to AD 900. And there are 9 units. Again, there are 9 units, starting with the introduction to the history of Ghana, followed by prehistory of Ghana from 50,000 BC to AD 1700. Focus on hunters and gatherers, followed by first farmers and villagers. Then in Unit 3, they look at the pupilling of Ghana, or the populating of Ghana, and the rise of states and kingdoms. The 4th unit looks at social and political organizations. Unit 5 is on the history of medicine. And Unit 6 is on the history of art and technology. And the 7th unit is on the history of the economy of Ghana. And unit number 8, then, it's only then that they get into the coming of Europeans. After dealing with this history across a long historical trajectory, which emphasizes the importance of all these historical processes, it's only much later that Europeans come, and they do focus on that. In Unit 9, the coming of Europeans, and finally, social and political developments between 1500 and 1900, after the contact with the Europeans. So that would really be what they focus on in Unit 9. That is the equivalent of our grade 11. That's why they cover in history. Then the last grade, which is our grade 12, they call it Senior High School 3. The focus here is on the history of Ghana from 1900 to 1991. So basically this is 20th century Ghana. This is 20th century Ghana. Here, the first unit is on social, economic, and political developments in Ghana, basically colonial Ghana, right? From 1900 to 1957. Then the second unit is on independence and after, and the Nkrumah years, the Nkrumah era. The third unit is on Ghana after the Nkrumah era, from 1966 to 1991. And the final unit is on Ghana in the Committee of Nations. So that gives you a sense of how in other parts of the continent, more specifically in Ghana, they deal with history at a higher phase. From ancient times, when learners are much more developed, much more mature to deal with complexity, and that's when they deal with these very complex subjects. The salient features coming out of the Ghana syllabus for me were these 5 points. The first one is the African-centeredness of the history content taught at school. And secondly, the centrality of ancient African history or pre-colonial history in the senior phase when learners are more cognitively developed and advanced to deal with complexity. And thirdly, the recognition that history of Africa dates back to over 1 million years. And fourthly, awareness that the various ancient civilizations awareness of what the various ancient civilizations of Africa contributed. And finally, the importance of archaeology and the methodological tools that it offers to deal with ancient African history. So those are some of the salient points that came out of the Ghana syllabus. Now, the last part, and I don't know how I'm doing for time, I'm probably not doing very well, so it's going to be very abbreviated. So we did these consultations last year between the 25th of July to the 4th of August. And the key questions that we are asking were, should history be integrated with life orientation, amongst other questions that we're looking at. And of course, various stakeholders in the provinces, basically presented their, because these were public presentations, they invited, they gave their inputs. And on the whole, we visited all the 9 provinces, and on the whole, the MTT was well received in all 9 provinces, and we had fruitful discussions. And the feedback that we collected from these consultations fundamentally contributed to the review and strengthening exercise, which I've just expressed. So I'll just give you a sense of what the people in Gauteng actually said, and we gave our presentation right here where we are sitting today. This is where we had a presentation. And it's not a complete coverage of everything that they said, but it gives you a sense of what our educators, some of our educators and various other stakeholders actually felt about what needs to be done. First is about the need to separate history from geography from grade 4 and address the content overload. Teachers simply cannot complete the syllabus, one of them said. History and geography teachers are not skilled enough to teach both subjects. Also, there is not enough synergy between geography and history because of social sciences syllabus at GET phase. The second one said, the subject advisors' roles are not well defined, and so there's no meaningful development and support to teachers, well, for teachers that is. Since the subject advisors do not have access to classrooms, they have no way of evaluating how and what is delivered during lessons. The other one said, teachers are unable to complete the curriculum content in a given year. There is always a backlog, and this promotes a teacher deficit model. But good teachers are using worksheets and other materials. It's important to find out which schools are using what materials. But some teachers don't know what to do with content, what should be taught and what should be examined. They are reliant on textbooks and don't develop their own materials. Learners don't read and write, and therefore need source-based materials to learn how to interpret, analyze, synthesize, comprehend, and compare. And finally, archaeology is key to the teaching of history, and it must be reintegrated, and I underline, into the history curriculum because it is the scientific part of the discipline. More background, historical context, and skills are needed to be able to use archaeology effectively, and teachers are not well trained in this regard. There's also a need to put human evolution back into the curriculum. The teaching of Mapungubwe as an ancient African state promotes knowledge about the African past. So this is what these are some of the views that were expressed at the meeting in Gauteng here on the day. And there follows many other things, and I really don't have time to say them all, but maybe I could just pick up on one or two. The CAP syllabus and content is very Eurocentric, and it is not about building the character of an African learner. We don't want blind patriotism, but history should be compulsory at senior grades. Maturity is required to interact with certain pasts. History must be updatable because it is also about the present. Learners should be able to talk about state capture and other developments in our economy. Others said that history must not be integrated with life orientation. LO is not examined and no one wants to teach it or take it seriously. Teachers need to be part of this discussion because such important changes cannot just be made by a top-down approach. And then maybe lastly, picking up on this next one about history is sometimes not offered in model C schools because they have the attitude that history should be left in the past. It is seen as the subject for those who are not able to do mathematics, science, and technology. History as part of humanities need to be made a priority subject and given the same status as maths, science, and technology at FET phase. So this is just a snapshot of some of the views expressed. These various other perspectives are contained in the report. So then we went to Limpopo, and in Limpopo, similar sort of perspectives came through. History should be made compulsory at FET phase, some teachers said. But in terms of the curriculum, we must avoid the Rwanda-Zimbabwe approach, the patriotic history type of approach, the one perspective approach, that is what he said, which promotes ethnicity and patriotic history. Furthermore, we need to make history compulsory to deal with problems of racism, xenophobia, tribalism. We need to prevent the unacceptable banning of schools and abuse by opportunistic politicians at local government level. Secondly, we also need a paradigm shift in the teaching of history, a move away from liberalism and Eurocentric history. Thirdly, we can't divorce history from politics. The Department of Basic Education needs the political will to implement the changes in order to make history compulsory at FET level. A phased approach is needed in order to be elevated, in order for history to be elevated. We cannot merely be a nation of scientists because the humanities are also important, another teacher said. And finally, history content should be, actually it's not the final one, but on this slide it is, of course. History content needs to be restructured, but research must be done before restructuring to create a guideline for the Department of Basic Education on how restructuring should be done. That is policy guidelines. There must be guidelines on who should be responsible for writing the new curriculum. How should we select teams to debate topics before they are decided upon? And on this, which is really the last slide, in terms of African history, grade 12, Congo, Zaire versus Tanzania, one teacher said it's actually quite difficult to teach and assess. So teachers avoid the teaching of African content, which you want to be foregrounded in caps. Instead, teachers focus their attention on the European content, which is easy because of familiarity. You need to restructure and overhaul the present content because it is Eurocentric, he said. Then the other one said, well, history must be a standalone subject, meaning that it should be separated from geography. At GET level, not just the way that it is now being separated at FET. At GET level, they should be separated, meaning do away with SS or social science. Have history and geography as two separate subjects. We need to separate short and long-term goals. In the short term, scale down history content and address the overload. Provide meaningful development and training of teachers. Training of teachers actually came through very strongly. Also, adequate funding should be allocated to attract better educators to teach history. And in the longer term, make history compulsory at FET level. It is critical for the development of responsible citizens and to achieve social cohesion, not life orientation. The other one said, history must not be part of life orientation. Life orientation is not a designated subject and therefore does not have any points attached to it. It does not enable learners to pursue their studies at university level. Hence, learners and teachers do not see the value of integrating history and life orientation. And finally, the Department of Basic Education must support and legislate the teaching of African history. Adopt the Brazilian style where African history is a compulsory subject in terms of the law that this particular teacher said. So in a nutshell, this is an overview. It's very rushed. There's a lot of content in there. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what it is. And I thank you very much. Thank you.
Prof. Lekwate, thank you so much, sir. I want to really appreciate your presentation, and in particular your judicious use of the allocated time. You actually saved us something like 10 minutes, and I really appreciate it because we are running a bit late. But perhaps more importantly, thank you very much for the very capable manner in which you uplifted the salient aspects of this report, given how comprehensive the report is. And I was watching these guys looking at you, and they were very, very attentive. So you captivated them. And I'm sure that the colleagues in the audience have many questions that they would like to pose, but please just plug them. There will be a slot on the agenda where we're going to give you that opportunity, and I do anticipate there are things that you would want to ask. But one good round of applause for Prof, please, for that presentation. This morning when I greeted you, I acknowledged all of you as distinguished guests, and I maintain that. But I want to add that there are some guests who are more distinguishable than others. And I want to, at this point, acknowledge and appreciate the presence of the Ambassador of Cuba, Rodolfo Beno Tez Burson. Ambassador, sir, will you please stand so we can all see you? You're most welcome. Thank you very much, sir, for gracing our function. I also want to acknowledge and welcome and appreciate the presence of one of our national leaders and a member of parliament, Dr. Matole Mashego. Who actually needs little introduction. I also noticed that we have with us the Superintendent General of the Eastern Cape Province, Mr. Themba Kojana. Please stand also, sir. And if my eyesight doesn't fail me anymore, I will suss out the others that I need to draw attention to. We have now reached that point where, in terms of the program, we are going to be going for a comfort break. I just want to inform you that the location of the restrooms are behind this building. The first restroom is if you walk straight down the parkway, imagining that you are exiting and don't you dare exit, but as you walk down, you will find the restrooms in the bottom. But further to that, if you walk around this building, onto your left-hand side, there's a circular structure on the left, and there are male and female restrooms on that side as well. In this comfort break, you're also invited to grab a quick cup of tea or coffee and a snack. And then as you get out of the room, I'm advising you now to switch on your cell phone, because you will see that you're either going to receive a WhatsApp or an SMS from me. I went to the register. And the message is saying very clearly, please eat quickly and get back here within 25 minutes. And the second message it's going to be saying to you is, as I walk into this room in your pocket, please put me on vibrate. So, colleagues, it's my cheap watch tells me it's 5 to 11. So we're going to give you approximately 25 minutes for this comfort break. Can I please ask you to remain seated until the Minister and the Ministerial Trust team leave, because they're going to go off to the holding room. 20 minutes. Okay. So it's now 5.